Hello, pre-med stars. So the question is, how did I study for the MCAT and what would I do differently? So my whole journey with the MCAT began the summer after my sophomore year. And so the summer after my sophomore year, I took a physics class in the summertime, and then I also wanted to start studying for my MCAT. I wanted to give myself at least 6 months to study for the MCAT. And so what I did was I bought some prep books, and I also had a prep course. And so I kind of used those as kind of my main resources to study for the MCAT, because I knew that I needed some type of structure in order for me to kind of stay focused as far as to study for the MCAT. Because I knew this test was very important. It's one of the key things that I needed to do well on in order to get into medical school. And so how I did it was I kind of broke up my studying for classes and studying for the MCAT. And so I would try to get all my classwork kind of done, and so I could focus the majority of my time studying for the MCAT. And so I knew at this point that my first 3 years of undergrad, I kind of did what I needed to do as far as establishing my GPA. And so I wasn't as worried about my GPA at this moment, but I was more so wanting to really kind of focus on my MCAT. And so I kind of made sure that I studied for my MCAT about 50-50, or even tried to a little bit more than my classes. The only downfall is what I end up doing, and so which was probably one of my biggest regrets, was I was taking one of the hardest classes in my pre-med career when I was also studying for my MCAT. And so this is one thing I definitely don't advise you guys to do. So whenever you are studying for your MCAT, make sure you're going to have a good amount of time where you have to study for your MCAT. So they say at least 3 to 6 months to study for your MCAT. And also you don't want to make sure your schedule is too packed to where you really don't have enough time to study for your MCAT. And so taking heavy loads of courses or doing a lot of research or extracurricular activities or extra jobs is really not a smart thing to do if you don't have to when you're studying for the MCAT. If at all possible, you want to make sure that semester or that time where you're studying for your MCAT is your most lax schedule, because that way you can really focus on your MCAT and do well on your MCAT, because that is something that medical schools really look at very closely, and it's probably, and I think is the biggest key factor to get into medical school is to doing well on the MCAT. And so you want to give yourself the best opportunity to do that, and so that's really just blocking out time so you can really focus on the MCAT. And I would say the second thing I regret is I basically told myself that I was not a good test taker. When I was in high school for the SAT and ACT, I didn't do well, and the excuse I used for myself for not doing well is, oh, I'm not a good test taker. And then looking back at it, the reason why I didn't do well in the test because I did not study for the test. And so it was just a kind of a cop-out to say that I wasn't a good test taker, when in actuality I didn't even study for the test. And so I kind of took that same mentality going in for the MCAT. And so I kind of told myself, I'm not a good test taker. I'm not a good test taker. And so if you tell yourself you're not a good test taker, guess what? You're not going to be a good test taker. And so that's one of the key things I kind of tell undergrads nowadays. Do not sell yourself that you're not a good test taker. You can say, I haven't performed well up to this point, but this is something new. This is a new journey. This is the MCAT. And so at this point, you can overcome that I'm not a good test taker, and you can really do well on this test. And so that's one thing that I did when I got to medical school. I got rid of the negative talk of saying I'm not a good test taker, and that really had benefited me in medical school. And so that's one thing that I would like to tell you guys. If you ever get in that trap of telling yourself you're not a good test taker, just get that negativity out and just really try to focus on the MCAT, and you'll see yourself that you can be a great test taker.